Okay, now that we can log in by using local, and we have an empty databases object over here, let me show you how to create a database. We'll right click on the databases object. So you should start off with something looking roughly like that, has sort of a database symbol on it. We're going to unfold that, find the databases folder object here, right click on it, and select new database. Then we get this new database window, and we just give our database a name. Now, typically you're going to be working on a lab or something along those lines, so you might name your database Lab 1, maybe even separate your labs into Lab 1A, 1B, 1C, because we've got several parts to some labs. In this case, I'm just going to name mine my social dot college, and I'm going to click OK. Okay. You can use spaces and so on, anything you like. Now when we've created a database, we have several folders underneath it, so if we further expand our database, you'll see the database name that you just created here, and several objects under it. There's database diagrams, tables, views, synonyms, etc. Until you learn more about databases, really the area we have to focus on is this tables area. So this is where we're going to see tables come up, but we're not going to use the tools just yet to create tables. At some point I might show you how to do that, but it's actually more difficult than typing in the code, so let's use a code window instead. And we call the code that you run in SQL queries. So what we need to do is right click on our database and choose New Query. You can also just make sure your database is highlighted and click on New Query up in the top bar here. You'll get a new query window. This is just a text file. And the first thing that I suggest you do whenever you're opening a new query window is go File Save and find a name for it. Right now I'm just going to put it in a temporary folder on my desktop because I'm probably going to delete this afterwards, but you guys might keep it. So find your desktop, find the temporary folder in there, or find your documents folder and save it in examples, whatever it is you do with it. I'm going to call it examples. And I'm going to call this, I like to put a date stamp on mine. So this is January, I'll do this way. So January 17th, 2017. And this is going to be my social example 1. Make it create statements. Now how you name your files is up to you, but I find the more descriptive it is, the easier it'll be to find later if I happen to forget where I saved it. One key thing here when you're working in your query window, if you accidentally selected the wrong database object when you were creating your query, if you click this new query here, you might have a query for the wrong database. So you want to make sure up in this drop-down list, once your cursor's inside this text area, you find this drop-down list and you make sure that your database name is the database that's up there in that list, because that's how you know you're interacting with that database. So I have put together some ideas for a social networking database here. And the social networking database will involve, will target college students. So one of the things you'll notice here is I'm tracking the typical stuff, email and password, first name and last name, but I've also got a school here, so people can put in, Niagara College, Brock, McMaster, Sheridan, George Brown, whatever college or whatever school they come from. The registration date, that's something we're going to track here as well. So whenever somebody signs up for an account, we know what day it was. And active, so we can switch on and off accounts like a lot of people like to do on Facebook. I've also got posts here. So I've got a typical ID. I just have the computer generate an ID for me, and we haven't learned how to do that yet, so we're going to be putting those in ourselves. And then our posts will have a heading and a body, just like an email, rather than just having a body like you might find on Facebook, just for fun. So we can mix it up a bit. Then we've got a post URL. That's how we can kind of connect to other websites or add images to our posts. And then we have post thumbs up and post thumbs down rather than likes or types of likes. Just people can click a thumbs up or thumbs down button at some point here. That is how I'm going to model my database. Let's do some create statements around these models. Okay. I've already chosen some data types. So this is what my tables look like right now. Just kind of styled them a little bit. And these are the same these are the same field names that I chose just on the other screen. I've got a bunch of field type and size stuff. And in constraints, you can ignore for your sake right now everything except for the primary key stuff. We'll go over these other ones over the next couple of weeks. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy in those two columns for my account table. Okay, I'm going to keep those in my clipboard and watch what I do with them. Here I'm going to write a create table statement. So it's create table. Remember, we want to create a table and not a database or some other object. And we want to call this table account. Okay, because you remember we are using a singular uppercase name for our entity names. Okay. I put my opening and my closing brackets and leave a little space to put my column definitions. And this is where that stuff I have in my clipboard comes into play. I've copied this to my clipboard and now I'm just going to paste. And I've got both columns of data already put there for me. I just have to add a little bit of formatting. So I'm going to put a comma here, comma here, comma here, and so on. So commas at the end of each of my column definitions. And then I will format those so they're a little nicer. By the way, you can just highlight all of these lines and hit the tab key and it'll push everything forward one indent space. Or if you've gone too far, perhaps you press tab too many times. If you hold down shift and press tab, it'll take it backwards. So that'll help you a little bit. And then, you know, typically it's nice to have our data types lined up, but that's less important than making sure that your code is kind of tidy on the left-hand side. And then we have to add our constraint. Let me zoom out a bit. And we're going to call it a PK account. So this part here, the PK, is our prefix for the constraint type we're about to make. This here is the name of the table that we're putting our constraint on. So primary key on account, and then we just add that little bit of extra description, and in this case it's ACCID because that's the where we're going to put our primary key, and you'll notice we plan that over here. Then we have to describe the constraint. So this is a primary key constraint and it takes only one piece of information, and that is what column that it's on. Okay. Now this here, this is a naming convention. If we named it something else, it wouldn't change the functionality. It would still work, assuming that we used a unique name that wasn't used somewhere else. But if we looked at something like this later on, we wouldn't really understand what it meant. So we try to use our naming conventions so that if we get errors and so on, we have an easy way of identifying where these constraints belong and being able to deal with our issues. So now at this point I can create that table. I'll click execute. All right. One key thing you'll notice is this message says commands have been completed successfully. We know that there's no errors here in our code. But when we look over here at our database in our tables folder, no new tables are there. That's because the create table statement has been sent off to another piece of software on our machine. In the school, it'll be another piece of software on another machine. That's our database server. And this piece of software we're using is the client. So the server gets the information and does something with it, but the client's not aware of what exactly happened on that side yet. So in order to find out, we have to refresh our client's information. So it has to request that from the server. In order to do that, we can just right-click on our tables folder or even our database folder, find the refresh option, and then when we unfold our tables, we can see anything that we created. Same thing applies when we're working in this SQL window. Right after we do any kind of DML, creating tables, dropping tables, running alter table statements of any kind, we want to go to our edit menu, find our IntelliSense submenu, and go to this refresh local cache option. That local cache is where it keeps track of all of the field names and table names and everything that we need to know about all of our entities. And that keeps things clean in this text area. Now you'll notice that when I refresh the local cache here, my create table my create table statement now has a red squiggly line, an error message basically under this account word. And what it's telling me is that there's already an object name account in the database, which is true because we already ran this create table statement. And so if we tried to run it again, you can see I get that message back. The database is saying, no, I can't make that table because I already made a table by that name. So you can see how these refreshes have to work, right? Our server on the other side is just doing its own thing, and our client's not always aware of everything that happened there. So we have to continuously refresh as we do DML. Okay. Now I'm going to do really quickly, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do a create statement on the next table, which was called posts. So create table post, opening and close brackets. Okay. I'm going to go to my Excel file. I'm going to grab those two columns. I'm going to copy and paste and format a bit. Put some commas in. Write my constraint for my primary key. One key thing is if we only want to run a certain bit of code in our text file, we want to make sure to highlight only the code we want to run. Otherwise, the execute button will try to run everything all at once, and the things that have already run might cause problems, either duplicating work or causing errors before the stuff you want to happen actually does. So we're going to highlight this create table statement we made, click execute, commands should have completed successfully, and then we can refresh our tables, and you can see that our tables are there. Same thing with the refreshing our cache. Post right now, as far as our client is concerned, post can still be made, but if we run, we know we can't. So let's make sure that we're always refreshing our cache as well. This will be useful for future statements that we use. So edit, IntelliSense, refresh local cache, or you can press Control Shift R. Then we know, okay, it knows that post is there and we're not allowed to do that anymore. And then we can save our text files so that we can save our work and have it for examples to look at later when we need to make new create statements. So file, save, your file is saved and you can close this. And your database is doing its own thing and you have the text file of the work that you did somewhere else.